turn on the mic. Thank you, everyone, for joining me this evening. And thank you, Amanda and Thrive, for allowing me the opportunity to speak today to share my story, as well as educate you on the statistics of suicide and normalizing suicide. I actually met Amanda in June of this year at an event in, where were we? It wasn't Berwyn. Was it Berwyn? No, I don't remember. Forest Park. I was volunteering with AFSP, and I happened to meet Amanda walking around, just sharing my story with her, and that's why I'm here today. I understand the importance and the power in actually sharing stories and being honest about your struggles and your circumstances. Because not only am I standing here today as a speaker, but I'm actually standing here today as not only a survivor, but a thriver in life. I've experienced profound loss, suffered major, relentless depression. And there was definitely multiple times when I didn't think I would be here today. I actually was not planning on being here today 5 years ago when I had my attempt. Grateful that I failed at that and that I'm here today to be able to share my story with you. Because in that, I also discovered that that is my purpose. Being able to turn pain into purpose is what I discovered as a result of everything that I've been through. And now my mission today is to be able to share my story with others to save lives. I'm on a mission to reduce suicide. I really want to eradicate suicide, and I'm not going to stop sharing my story until I save as many lives as possible. So again, I am grateful for you all being here today, because I don't want this to be just a presentation on statistics. This is actually a true story, and I want you to realize that my story is coming from a very real stance and also a very authentic place. So I, again, appreciate you allowing me to heal out loud with you and allowing others to be able to heal out loud in a safe, comfortable environment, which is what we need. So what we will be covering today, and by the time you all leave this presentation, you will have understood the scope, the impact of suicide in the United States, be able to recognize the warning signs and some of the risk factors of suicide. Also learn some practical steps to help someone in crises, including how to start the conversation, as well as be able to assist someone when you're having that conversation. It starts with the conversation. We have to have the conversations. In addition, you will also be able to explore ways to shift the narrative around suicide from shame and silence to openness and support, because that's what's needed. And lastly, we'll also be able to understand how to build more proactive factors and create safe, supportive environments for overall mental health and mental awareness. So again, just going over the agenda, I'll share pieces of my journey with you, from silence to speaking out loud to healing out loud. I will also, again, go over the scope, the power of conversations, recognizing warning signs, the practical ways to support someone, as well as together, collectively, how we can change the narrative on suicide. But before we begin, Before we begin, though, I would like to just pause and ask you all, when was the last time you truly asked someone how they're doing? I don't mean just in passing, just, hey, how you're doing. I mean actually asking someone, how are you doing today? Really, how are you feeling? Because that's where it starts. That's exactly where it begins. And having just that one simple conversation can actually start the healing process for an individual. There are over 700,000 people dying by suicide each year. That's one attempt every 40 seconds. In the United States alone, someone is attempting suicide. For 1 successful suicide, there are 25 attempts that are reported. We don't even know about the ones that go unreported. Suicide is the 11th leading cause of death in this country, yet we are still afraid to talk about it. Or we wait until after someone has lost their life to suicide to talk about it. And in 2021, there were nearly 50,000 Americans that died by suicide. It's 2024. We're not even completely done with this year, and I've already heard way too many stories this year alone, especially with our young children, the young citizens of this country. The ages of 10 to 34 are most likely to actually have a successful suicide. That's not okay with me. I'm a mom. I have a teenage son, and I am doing everything in my power to save his life, not only for him, for his peers, for other students, for everyone, but especially for the youth. It's not fair that we don't create safety, we don't create normalizing having the conversations for them to be able to speak openly and honestly about how they're feeling. So that's why it's so important that we just start normalizing having the conversation. And I understand that most of this data is readily available. However, again, these are just estimated numbers, but there are underreported countries. So overall, the amount of suicides in this world is astonishing. And according to the CDC, there were over 48,000 people that died in 2021. 2022, that was more than that. That was more than half of that had attempts in 2022. That's more than homicide and natural disasters combined. And suicide also takes more lives than motor vehicle crashes. Yet we don't want to talk about it. So how do we prevent it? How do we get ahead of it if we can't normalize having the conversations? And if you wanted to find out more info, you can actually find the AFSP.org website for more statistics on individual countries, as well as individual demographic data. But again, there is an estimate that for every successful attempt, there are 25 others that have actually made the choice to try to take their life. So how many people in your life do you know or could suspect that are suffering in silence right now, hiding their pain, just like I did, essentially? How many of us right now are holding on to our struggles, thinking silence is the only option? What would it look like if we all just started to heal out loud? If we lived in a world where we can just say, I'm not okay today. I just lost my dog 2 days ago, and I'm doing the best that I can today. So have patience with me, help me, give me a safe space where I can share my feelings and my emotions. However, as the individual, I also have to know that I deserve to be able to heal, and I also deserve to ask for the help that I need. However, though, 5 years ago, I didn't know this because I was going through an extremely dark moment in my life. And at the time, it seemed like the worst case scenario because at that time, that was the scariest thing I had experienced. And oftentimes when people have suicide attempts, we often think that it's one particular incident or instance that's caused them to have the attempt, but it's never just one event or instance. There's a pile up. There's things that just start to pile up. And then there's that one, as they say, the straw that broke the camel's back that pushes the individual over the edge. And for me, that's what it felt like. Because every day I would wake up feeling extremely heavy, suffocating. Just felt like I was trapped in a box with no windows, no air, and just no way out. And even though I was surrounded by people who cared and loved me, I still felt isolated, like I was all alone, and no one could understand the storm that was raging inside of me. It's this exhaustion that just goes beyond physical exhaustion. It's just waking up every day, heaviness of sadness, putting on a mask, pretending that you're okay, though inside you're struggling, you're dying. You want to be free of the pain and you don't know what to do, but keep going. I was mentally drained, emotionally numb, and I just felt like I had no control over my life. And one of the most important things that we've learned about suicidal people is that, again, it's not just about sadness, it's deeper than that. It's when you've reached a breaking point where emotional or physical pain just feels extremely unbearable. Thinking becomes constricted. So in that state of mind, you feel like you're in a tunnel vision, and that's exactly what it felt like. Options disappear. All you see and all you feel is pain. You can't even imagine a future where the pain ends. So let me ask you guys to think back to one of your most excruciating physical moments, the most physical, painful experiences of your life. Maybe it was an injury. Maybe you were extremely sick. Now imagine asking someone that you are in pain, somebody that's in pain, somebody is asking you, can you give me directions? You probably can't because you're so busy feeling the pain that you can't hear or think. I can't give anybody anything because all I feel is pain in this moment. Because pain distorts everything. And it makes even the simplest things impossible. Getting out the bed. That was a struggle. That was a struggle for me for so long. And I would wake up wondering, why am I awake? I asked not to wake up today, but yet I'm awake again. Why? All I can feel, all I can see, all I can think was pain, pain, pain. And I could have told someone, but because it was so unbearable, I couldn't find the words. I could not describe it. I just knew I was stuck in the shadows of my mind. And research has actually shown that suicidal feelings are usually temporary. They can come on intensely, but they can also pass. So the key here is to be able to get people to get out of those critical moments by offering them support, creating distance between them and whatever means can possibly harm them. But how do we get to that point if we don't start talking about it? Because see, in my journey, again, I found myself in this tunnel of pain as if there was no escape. Now, nobody knew because I was pretending like everything was okay, except there were little subtle signs, which we'll talk about because there are some things that go unnoticed, but are actually very much red flags. And again, it's more than just one simple instance, one simple incident. It is an accumulation of pain. I know for me, I had so much emotional pain, so much emotional hurt that I was still holding on to. I had never dealt with, never understood how. So when I went through that pivotal moment 5 years ago, it felt like that was life ending. And I just knew that nobody would be able to understand what I was feeling because nobody is talking about this. And if they are, they're probably thinking, you're crazy, or you're selfish, or all of the negative things, all of the stigmas, all of the stereotypes that prevents us from being honest about how we're feeling and prevents us from asking for help. But one thing I do know for sure is that even now, today, some thoughts may feel permanent, but they aren't. And that's just the power of the mind, right? But when your heart and your mind are disconnected and your brain is just telling you fight or flight and you give up, you can't see that. It feels like it's reoccurring, it's ongoing, especially when you're suffering with mental health struggles such as depression or alcoholism or whatever it is that is causing you so much distress. But knowing that you have someone there that can support you or even hold space for you or just ask you, what can I do to support you, truly does make a world of difference. But it starts with having the conversation. It starts with us creating the safety. And there's very much a lot of strong evidence putting time and distance between someone in crisis and the means to hurt themselves can be life-saving. That's why, again, it's so important that we keep acting as soon as we recognize that someone is struggling, or as soon as you start to recognize that someone is doing something unusual, or you start to notice certain habits are starting to decline. Because I know I was overwhelmed by so many feelings, so much failure. I was a failure as a wife, I was a failure as a mother, I was a failure as an employee, as a person. Every thought in my head screamed, you're not enough, you'll never be enough. And I became convinced that the only way to silence these thoughts was to just silence myself. Because what else was there to do? I didn't know, because I hadn't heard anybody tell me where to go or how to address this. Although I tried to seek help, of course I had a therapist, I had a counselor, but by the time I started counseling, I was already in the midst of it. So I kind of got the help. I wouldn't say it was too late, but it would have been better had I started the counseling sooner. Because I just didn't know a way out, but I knew that what I was feeling was deeper than any depression I had felt before, because depression was something I struggled with for years. Again, when I dealt with a lot in my childhood and what I talk about in my book, there was a lot of things, a lot of grief that I had never healed from. So as life continues to life, struggles continue to struggle, it becomes overwhelming. And depending on the individual, we all have different circumstances, different levels of complexity for us. What looks chaotic for one person may not look chaotic for another, but it doesn't matter, because for that individual, that could be a life-shattering event for them. So how do we show them that they're not alone and that their life is worth living? Because I know when I woke up in the hospital, it was a shock. It was disbelief, shame. Again, shame for me, anger, blame, all of the stories that I was telling myself. No one was telling me these things, but my brain told me these things. My brain made me feel that way, although my heart didn't believe that. My heart would never have told me that my life wasn't worth living, but because I was in fight and flight mode, and because the depression had become so continuous, that became my new normal. So I got comfortable in that state. But in that moment, in the hospital, it just seemed like, this is not my life. This can't be happening. I'm still living in a tunnel vision, because how did I get here? How had I let things get to this point? I was supposed to be strong, right? We're supposed to be strong. I have a son, I have a family, I have employees I have to look out for when I go to work. I have to be strong. Yet, here I am feeling like I failed at everything. I failed everyone. And one of the questions I always get is, was your son not enough for you to live for? And it's an excellent question, I get it. But again, when you're in pain, you can't hear anything but the pain. So absolutely my son is worth living for, but 5 years ago, the pain told me my son is better off without me, because I'm causing him more harm by being in his life. That's what the mind of a person that's suicidal, that's what they're thinking and feeling. So that's why we have to start just asking, start normalizing it and letting others know it's okay. You're not alone. It's okay. Things don't always go the way we plan it, but we can still live. There's still so much to live for. And that's why I had to write my book. That's why I stand here today, because I'm grateful for the opportunity, for the chance to still be alive. And even though I was torn between wanting to disappear, I still wanted to fight, because I didn't really want to die. I just wanted to get out of pain. So now that everybody knows I'm in pain, they see me, now what? How do I get out of it? Because even after the attempt, it doesn't mean life goes back to normal, because it didn't. Because now I am struggling with, what did I just do? What are they thinking about me? What are people going to say about me? Because now I look like a crazy person and I look weak, because that's what society has me thinking. That's what the stigma has us thinking. So how do we start to rewrite that story? It starts with us being honest, being authentic, starts with me letting everybody know, letting the world know it's okay to heal out loud. It is okay to say you're not okay. And we don't have to be ashamed, because we're all humans. And we should treat people with mental health struggles just like we treat people that have physical health struggles, just like people that have diabetes and heart disease. We don't judge them. We don't create a stigma for them. Yet, when we're telling you we are struggling and we're suffering mentally, we get judged or we get criticized. And I, for one, am not going to allow the world to continue to be that way. I won't allow us to continue to live that way. Because again, I got a second chance to live. I didn't have to be here today, but I was terrible at trying to unalive myself, thankfully. And I know now I have to do this. I have to share this, because there are still people dying. Somebody right now is having an attempt because somebody didn't have a conversation with them and asked them, are you okay? Because somebody didn't ask them, what can I do for you? Because somebody didn't see that they are slowly but surely checking themselves out. So how do we start today? By changing this. What would it look like if we all started to heal out loud? Because healing is painful. I'm not going to pretend that it's not. It absolutely is. And learning from that, it has allowed me to see that in all of the pain and struggle, I built up the resiliency to be able to live and fight for another day, because we all can. But when you're in pain, you don't see it. But once you go through it, once you get a second chance, you can see that, okay, I have an opportunity to do this again. What am I going to do this time? For me, I chose to heal out loud. I chose to start speaking my truth, even when it's messy and uncomfortable or painful. But that's part of the process. It has to be painful. It has to be messy so that you can get to the good part, so that you can start to heal, so that you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. How many of us are carrying pain right now in silence? Or we know someone who is carrying pain right now in silence? Afraid, they're afraid. You're afraid to speak up because you don't want to be judged, or you don't want to be seen as weak. But true strength comes from vulnerability, from being honest about where we are, even when it's hard. That's the real strength. So even though I had that attempt 5 years ago, that wasn't the end for me. And it doesn't have to be the end for anyone else. There is always hope, and there is always another way. And sometimes the bravest thing that we can do as individuals is simply just ask for help. It starts with us being honest with ourselves first, knowing that when we are in pain, when we are struggling, we can ask for help. And we can give help to others when they're in pain. Why do people take their own lives? The large majority of people that die by suicide oftentimes have a mental health condition, which typically contributes to the death. And for 1 in every 4 people will experience a mental health condition, but most do not go on to die by suicide. Thankful, grateful for that. And research has consistently shown that the large majority of the people that do, again, die by suicide, they have a mental health condition like depression or schizophrenia or something like that, that oftentimes may go undiagnosed, or people may be aware of it, but they're not managing it properly. So again, when we know of people that are suffering with mental health conditions, then we can start to get ahead of it. We can prescribe medications, therapy, but it also takes doing more work. It requires doing more healing work, deeper work, being honest with yourself, asking yourself true questions about what it is that you believe in and what do you stand for and what do you love about you and your life. Realizing that we all have a reason, a gift, and a purpose to be alive. And it may or may not be recognized by some people or some loved ones when somebody is struggling, but when we know and we can properly diagnose and treat it, then we can start to get ahead of it. Because research will always tell us that having clear mental health conditions doesn't tell you the whole story. It won't tell you the whole story, but it will give you some pieces of it so that now we can start to rewrite things. Now we can start to understand. Now we can start to unpack what it is that is really causing this chaos, this stress inside of us. The vast majority of the people that struggle in silence will, again, they will do it because they don't feel like they're worth it. They don't feel like anybody is listening. But most people are ambivalent when it comes to suicide. Nobody really wants to take their life, but we just want to get out of pain. We don't want to be in pain. And in that moment, the pain is telling us the only thing we can do is just check out. I know for me, that's exactly what my brain was telling me, but instead of checking out, I should have been checking in to see what it was that was ultimately triggering me, because the trigger is what it was that I needed to resolve. It was the thing that I needed to address. So how do we stop this? How do we stop them from even having the attempt? Because some of the key strategies in suicide prevention involve actually engaging in part of the person wanting to stay, helping them to realize that they have a reason to be here, helping them want to be alive. But one way we can do this is actually start by creating connection with people. Again, it goes back to having conversations. Don't just look at people. Don't just assume that everybody's okay because of how they look. Because I look like this every day 5 years ago, and yet I still had an attempt. So that's why it's so important that we just start to build safety, create connection, asking people, building relationships. You don't even have to know people personally, but you can tell and offer space for them to share or for them to heal or a lending hand, whatever it is that they need to get out of that moment, because there is a chance that they can be saved. So we continue to connect with them. We connect with these people. Then we decrease the visibility and the presence of things around them. Again, we have to make sure that anybody that is in that state, we have to make sure that they're safe. So we don't want to have them want to attempt, so we have to make sure that there's nothing visibly around them that they can possibly harm themselves. So some of the health factors, again, going back to why people have suicide attempts, one of these being, again, mental health conditions, depression, anxiety, bipolar, substance use disorders, and physical health problems. People that oftentimes have physical chronic health conditions, they're depressed, they're in pain, it's struggle, it's hard, it's difficult. Especially people that have traumatic brain injuries. So when there's biological factors and physical conditions that are involved, we have to make sure that we are having the conversations. We have to make sure that we're getting ahead of it. We have to ask them. Because as I said before, people that die by suicide oftentimes do have an active mental health problem, depression being the most common one. That was actually what I was struggling with, but they did eventually diagnose me with bipolar disorder. Now that I was aware of it, I was able to get ahead of it. Bipolar disorder is also shown to be high risk, although the disorder is less common than depression. So when you're bipolar, again, me not understanding what it was that I had, I didn't understand the cycles, I didn't understand the highs and the lows, I didn't realize how low you can go with bipolar disorder because it was something I never knew about. It was nothing that I was fully aware of, nor did I hear anyone speaking of it. But I knew that internally, I didn't want to be alive anymore. But who do I tell? How do I get ahead of this? How do I stop this? Even though I worked at a hospital, I didn't know where to go. I didn't know I could go into the ER and tell them that I was thinking about harming myself because that was never anything that was communicated. That was never anything that was taught to me. And I was in my 30s then, and I didn't know that. So how do we make sure we know this? How do we all get educated? We start by having the conversations. We start by putting out the resources. And when you notice someone, for example, that has one of these health factors, the best way for you to be sure and make sure that they're okay, or if you are concerned or detect a possible change in their mental health, you have to ask the person, are they okay? To seek help and to get an evaluation, to get effective treatment. We can't just sit idly to the side, just waiting to see. Trust your gut. If there's a feeling, ask the person, get ahead of it. Start just opening up the conversation, start to have the dialogue. Even if they don't want to continue talking about it, allow them to know that they have the support, that you're there for them, and don't stop. Continue checking in with them, continue following up with them. Because many people may not realize that they're actually in distress due to a mental health condition. So providing information on access to mental health support, connecting them to resources, again, all of these things will help them to be able to get a control of their mental health condition and also advocate for their own health, their own safety, their own well-being. Most importantly, their life, because their life matters. Some other factors could be a history of suicide, family history of mental health conditions, child abuse, previous suicide attempts, and loss, grief, loss. That can be extremely triggering. But I want to go back to the family history of mental health conditions for a minute, because I know in my family, I don't know anybody that has ever talked about having a mental health condition, and not too many people do. So how do you know if you have a family history? Me personally, I don't know because both of my parents are deceased. However, I know that there's something wrong in my mind, at least it felt like it was. So now that I know, I can get ahead of it. Now I can educate my son. Now I can start to educate my family. Because there are some things that sometimes are in the family history, yet nobody in the family is talking about it. Or if it's child abuse, sometimes we don't even want to talk about abuse. Do you see that there are things that go unnoticed, that go unanswered because we are afraid to have the conversation? All of these things can start to rewrite, create a safer world where people can start to see that they have an option for healing, that they are not alone in their struggles, that they don't have to isolate because they have support. There's lots of support, there's lots of reasons, and most importantly, they deserve to live. We all deserve life. We should never cheat ourselves of our lives because it's a gift. It's a wonderful gift to have life. So as we talk about these historical factors, previous suicide attempts, again, if we don't know that somebody had an attempt the first time, how do you know if it's a previous suicide attempt? Because for me, I think I probably did have more than one attempt, but only one landed me in the hospital because I didn't say anything the first time. I didn't even know what it was. I just knew I was going through a crisis at the moment and I wanted to get out of pain. Again, nobody knew. I didn't say anything and nothing was ever said. And then I had another attempt 5 years later, and this one actually does land me in the hospital. So what does that tell us? Is that we really need to just create safer spaces. We must start talking about it. And then there's environmental factors. Having access to lethal means, having exposure to various dangerous materials, things that can kill you. Lethal means we don't want to have anyone in those spaces, obviously, when they're not in a safe space mentally and emotionally. But when you're in that state of mind, you don't understand that. But if it's out there, what are the chances that you are going to probably try to attempt that? So we have to make sure we're safe, we keep people safe, and we don't have things around that can possibly harm them, especially our children, teenagers, adolescents. Prolonged stress. How often do we walk around living in a stressful world? We go to work, stress. We come home, stress. When do we have a time to decompress? When do we release the stress? And you just keep going and going and going. I know, because I did it. And I kept going until I couldn't go any longer. So what do we do? How do we stop this? Prolonged stress. If you're in a chaotic environment, if you're at home and you're not happy, or if you're at work, you're not happy, you're having relationship problems, legal problems, God forbid you have a traumatic event like a job loss or death. All of these chaotic, traumatic things all build up, lead to stressful life events. So if you're having all of these things on top of each other and they're piling up, it becomes extremely overwhelming. So to better understand, again, the suicide risk, here's an example. You have genetic risk, depression, prolonged stress at work. When someone dies by suicide, often the story only talks about the environmental factors. Or a person may just see a life event, like bullying at school or a job loss, and then they see that the person died by suicide. But it wasn't because of that, because we assume it was that event, but it wasn't. There's always a bigger, fuller story, which is why I wrote my book, Healing Out Loud, because I wanted people to see that we all have stories that we are stuck in, that we live in, that we need to heal through. But if we don't even acknowledge it, if we can't see ourselves, then how can we free ourselves? How do we get better? Because what others don't know is that when a person who has died by suicide, when they have like genetic risk, or if they're suffering from mental health conditions, any of these stressful events, or any underlying depression or anxiety, all of these things pile up. It's extremely overwhelming. And don't even involve drugs and alcohol, because we know that alcohol and drugs are depressants. Those are mood changers. And all of this chaos, all of this trauma, all of this stuff to escape what we're actually feeling is normal, because I did it. I tried to do any and everything to escape what I was feeling before I had that attempt. So that's what I mean by there are signs. There are subtle things that you can see. If you notice someone close to you drinking more often, I'll get it, sometimes work can be stressful. You may want to have something one time after work. But if you notice that it's constantly, day after day, weekends, those are things to start to look out for. Or even if you notice someone close to you constantly sleeping all day, laying in a bed, just laying around. I used to think I was lazy. A therapist told me in my 20s that I was depressed, and I said, no, I'm not, I'm just lazy. So for years, I was in denial about my depression. Because as far as I'm concerned, I just like to lay in bed all day, right? That's it. No. She told me I was depressed, and I'm like, but no, first of all, I'm in my 20s. Secondly, I could never be depressed. Who, me? Well, what would they say? Because society doesn't want anybody to be depressed. I could never be depressed. Because now I've created this stigma, this story. I have this pressure on me, so no, I'm not depressed. I won't even wear that label. And I didn't until I had to. So therefore, it's a lot of things, a slew of reasons why someone has a suicide attempt. And it can be any reason, is what I want you to see, because it can be any reason. That's why it has to start with us having conversations. There's a power in conversations. But I know that there's a big myth about suicide. If you talk about suicide, it will make someone think about it or make it worse. I'm here to tell you that is not true. As a living witness, that is not true. Because before I actually had my attempt, I had the thought for months. And I tried to ignore the thought. I tried to pretend like it wasn't there. I tried to escape from it. Then it just kept getting louder and louder and louder. I wasn't having a conversation. No one was having a conversation with me. So that's why we have to start having the conversation. So it's not true. It's okay to ask someone, are you thinking about attempting suicide? Are you thinking about unaliving yourself? Do you not want to be alive anymore? We have got to be that direct, that clear, that blunt. We're saving lives, right? Why not? Absolutely ask. I wish somebody had to ask me, because I wouldn't have done it, because I would have absolutely told them, yes, I think I'm ready to check out, because this is too much. This is too much. I've had enough. There's nothing else that I can put up with. So the truth is, talking about suicide does not cause it. Silence does. And in my own life, I kept silent for far too long because of the fear of judgments, the fear of failures, of what people wouldn't understand. Because people can't understand something they haven't been through, right? And it's so quick and easy to judge someone, especially after they've had an attempt. Or if they've been successful, the first question asked is, well, how bad could it have been? At that point, it's too late because they can't tell you. But it's because of the silence in which nobody addressed it that led to that event happening. Because I was silent, I was suffocating. I told you guys, it was hard. I could not breathe. I was sitting in silence. I was sitting at work, not doing anything, although my boss did notice a change in my behavior at work, still wasn't sure what it was. And obviously nobody would think suicide, but just asking, are you okay? I notice a change in your behavior lately. Is everything all right? What can I do for you? Do you need anything? Just having that dialogue can save a life. According to the AFSP, nearly 54% of the Americans that have been affected, or I should say, 54% of Americans have been affected by suicide in some way. And yet, we still hesitate to talk about it. We have got to break the silence, right? We have got to break the silence right now. Amanda told me earlier today about some statistics here just in this area alone that's alarming. As suicide attempts, successful suicide attempts in this area just this year. So having honest conversations, vulnerable conversations, they will save lives. Think about it. How many of us hesitate to ask hard questions because we're afraid of the answers? Are you okay? Can you ask somebody that question? And will you be able to support them in that space if they say, no, I'm not okay? But have the conversation. Show them that you care. Showing that you care, it allows them to feel safe. And it allows you to be able to gain more information about the level of distress in which the person is in. Allow them to see that you're there to support them just by asking that. Even if they don't Open up right away. Keep showing them the love and the support. Don't be silent, is basically what I'm trying to get you to see. So how do we recognize some of these signs? How do you know? There are many risk factors for how suicide can develop over time. Warning signs are immediate. They're observable behaviors. But there are also some other subtle signs that you may not be aware of. So it's important to pay attention to both the risk factors as well as the warning signs. And if you should notice any of these in someone close to you, you have to reach out to them. If you yourself are struggling, don't hesitate to seek help. There's plenty of support. There's mental health. We have mental health therapists. We have the 988. We have the crisis number. We have family and friends. There's plenty of resources. I coach people in mental health support. There's plenty of resources that nobody should have to suffer in silence. So some of those signs may look like someone saying, I'm feeling hopeless, talking about feeling hopeless, talking about feeling trapped, or seeing themselves as a burden. I know for me personally, I always felt like I was a burden because I didn't think I was worth living for. I didn't even think I was worth asking help. So I absolutely felt like a burden. So that's why we have to make sure if somebody is starting to say those things, pay attention to that. Ask the question, what does that mean? Some people may mention feeling overwhelmed, or they may describe this unbearable pain. Whether they speak openly about it, or even if they just hint at it, always take these comments seriously. Just trust your gut. We're talking about lives. It does not hurt to just ask and make sure that they are safe. If you notice an increase in drug or alcohol use, reckless or risky behaviors, sometimes people will tell you, I have no reason to live. What's the point? These are things, subtle signs that we have to pay attention to. Sometimes people will put it on their social media. But we often think that, oh, these people are just trying to seek attention. Sometimes you have to give attention. And that's exactly what's needed. They want the attention. They need the attention. Sometimes we withdraw from our activities. We withdraw from our family and friends. We isolate. I was a serious isolator. Isolating was my thing. I did that well. I shut myself out completely. And it became so normal that I didn't know any other way. That was just the normal way of living. Then the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden now everybody's isolated. Then I felt fine. I started to heal. I started to recover because all of my chaos started in 2019. So when I had to be isolated, when the world slowed down, I got a chance to actually turn in and actually start to heal. I already had a therapist, I already had a psychiatrist, but being at home all day, every day, that was different. It allowed me to see things differently. It allowed me to heal in a loving way and start appreciating the fact that I woke up today. Just getting out of the bed is a win. Just those small little things, those small wins, helped me start to rebuild my life. So that's how we start to create safety. This is how we start to help support people in these spaces. If you notice extreme mood swings, being angry, being mad, being happy, being sad, these are very loud signs and symptoms. Looking for ways to actually try to kill themselves. If you hear them talking about it, if you see that they're looking for guns, you do a search and you see on the computer that they've been looking at ways to attempt suicide or ways to harm themselves. There are things that you can see and you can tell, especially in children. They start to research those things. You can start to look at their history, their web history, and you can see the things that they're looking at. Sometimes people give away prized possessions or they give away money. They start to finalize things. They start making plans because they're getting ready to exit. That's a sign right there that a lot of people don't even really recognize. Sometimes they take all their money and they just start recklessly spending because they know that they are getting ready to exit this life and this world. So in addition to these behaviors, people at risk for suicide may display a range of, like I said, various mood swings. They can be very impulsive, start to do things unusual, start to do things driving fast in traffic and swerving in and out of lanes, or being promiscuous, having unsafe sex, or doing all kinds of things that are just outside of their character. All signs because they are getting ready to try to check themselves out. It can be sometimes a sudden as unexplained happiness. You would never have thought that actually being happy would be a sign of somebody who wants to attempt suicide. But if it's because they're just suddenly happy out of nowhere, and you know that they've been on rock bottom, you know they've constantly been depressed, check in. Again, hey, I noticed you're feeling better today. What's going on? I love how happy you are. Can you tell me? What have you been doing? What have you been working on? It's just that simple. Check in, connect with them to find out. Because we all have ups and downs. But when you start to notice things that seem very uncharacteristic or concerning, it is so important that you talk about it. Open communication absolutely will make a huge difference in helping someone to feel seen, supported, and most importantly, encouraged to seek help. So if you suspect someone may be attempting or thinking about it, stay with them. Please stay with them. If you are in the vicinity of someone that you believe is thinking about it, stay with them. Do not leave them alone. However, if the situation puts you at risk, your own safety at risk, then please do call 911. And always make sure to remove any lethal weapons, any drugs, or anything that they can potentially harm themselves with, anything that could be potentially dangerous. And if possible, escort them to the hospital. Take them to the emergency room. Make sure they go to the emergency room to get help. So how do we change this narrative on suicide? How do we change shame and silence to openness and support? Because suicide is not an ending. It is a plea for help. They want help. Help. How easy is that to give? By simply asking, are you okay? What can I do to serve you? How can I support you in this space? We can create a culture that is smart about mental health and suicide prevention. We are. By being here today, we are creating a culture. I told you, I'm committed. I am. As long as I live, as long as there's breath still in my body, I'm committed. I will not stop. I will not stop until we can create a world of safety and vulnerability, and we can say, I'm not okay. But it requires all of us together, collectively. It's not just one, it's all. But it starts just with us. So what do? We can start today. Start by reaching out to someone. Even if it's someone that you don't even know is struggling, just check in with people. Check in with your family and friends. Quick text message, hey, I've been thinking about you, hope all is well. You need anything, let me know. A neighbor or anyone. Love is priceless as far as I'm concerned. So let's express that unconditionally to our brothers and sisters. And educate yourselves on the warning signs and the prevention strategies, especially the warning signs, because they can be subtle sometimes. So here's my challenge. I do want you all to actually reach out to someone. Maybe not tonight, but tomorrow. I want you to reach out to someone and start the conversation. Just have the conversation. Because healing is a journey. So explore all alternative resources for healing and growth. Like I said, I specialize in coaching people because sometimes people have mental health support, but then they're still stuck. They're still struggling, and they're still not able to understand what it is that's triggering them, why they can't seem to get out of this rut. Why does it feel like they take one step forward and two steps back? What is the story that they're telling themselves? Why do they feel like they are not lovable enough to live, to fight for? Healing Out Loud, my book, is a guide to breaking silence and finding our voice. I wrote it from my perspective, sharing my journey, but I also give questions and tips and advice for the readers because I want us to start healing. I want us to start loving on ourselves first so that we can start to see that we each are accountable for each other. Because I love me so much, I love you so much that I want to see you live. I want you to be here with me because you have a gift. You have a purpose in this world. Whose life could you change today just by asking, how are you really doing? So these are some resources that you can provide to someone who is in a state of suicide, who is feeling like they are on the edge and they cannot get out of it. Provide them with the 988 suicide and crisis number. 988, that, I have to say this because my phone number has started with 988 since 2000. I've had that phone number for over 20-something years. And here I am today, standing here talking about 988 as a resource. I absolutely was instrumental in getting this 988 number implemented. I wrote into my congressman. I did every email AFSP sent, NAMI said, I send, because I know how important it is that we start to have more resources. That we also start to put these resources everywhere for people to see. You notice when you go to the doctor's office, you see what to do when someone is having a stroke, but we don't know what to do when someone is having a mental health crisis, or we don't know the resource numbers. You have to actually come into places like this. You don't see it readily available. We need to start making these resources just readily available, just like we do all other health resources. We have the crisis text line. You don't even have to call anybody anymore. You can actually text to get help. And as always, the National Suicide Prevention number is 24 hours a day. It's always open 24/7. And that number is 800-273-8255. Or you can text HOME to 741-741 for immediate support. So many options, so many resources. We need people to understand that they don't have to go through any of this alone. They shouldn't have to go through this alone. We have people here to help us. People need people. None of us should have to go through any of these battles alone. So why don't we start talking about it openly so we can see that we're not alone? I can help you with that struggle. Or if they don't want to talk to you, if you can't save that space for them, that's okay. Give them these resources. There's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know how I can, but I want to offer you this resource. Can I help you call them? Can I take you to the ER? How can I help you? Everybody take your phone out. Please and thank you. And take a picture of me. No, I'm joking. I want you guys to take a picture of this. I want you to take this picture now, so you already have it. So it's in your phone, so at any moment you need to share it. You got the picture, hit send. Because even if you don't need these resources, somebody else may need it. And when people start to reach out, for example, when they call out to 988, they will hear a greeting message, but there are trained crisis counselors available to support them in that space. So, Oh, okay. I didn't know if it was an accident or what. I don't know what it was. But like I said, when they reach out to the 988 crisis number, they have Spanish, English agents available, and they have someone that can support them. So we want to make sure we give all of these resources, have this information readily available. And if somebody is actually in crisis, you think they're about to attempt